these are the 6 commitments that we just went through of a healthy marriage, and with practice, they become daily habits. Hey guys, Joe here, back to the Word with a video on the 6 gospel commitments every Christian couple should make to the Lord and one another in their marriage day by day. I'm going to pull the content from this video from this book right here, Marriage by Paul David Tripp, 6 gospel commitments every couple needs to make. So if you want more in depth of these 6 commitments, pick this book up from Crossway, wherever books are sold. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to talk about 2 other of my favorite marriage books. So this is one of my favorite marriage books, and then I have 2 others that I will share at the end of this video. So let's hop into the content. I did a longer review of this book on my channel that you can find other places, but I'm going to hop into chapter 4, day by day. So he talks about day by day being the mantra that we need in our marriages. He says, day by day, oh dear Lord, 3 things I pray: to see thee more clearly, to love thee more dearly, follow thee more nearly, day by day. And so Paul Tripp says, I don't think it would be possible to have more appropriate mission statement for a marriage, but to see the Lord, to grow closer to him day by day. He says, you fix a marriage vertically before you ever fix it horizontally. And then he goes on after talking about getting our relationship with God right so that we can live rightly with our spouse, in relationship to others around us. He then goes through 6 gospel commitments, or 6 really commitments that you should make as a Christian to the Lord and to your spouse daily. They're rooted in the gospel. They're things God can work in our lives through his power, instead of us settling for a marriage that is less than what God would have for us. So he says this on page 70 of this book. He says, here are the daily commitments that become the daily habits of the kind of marriage that God's design intended and his grace can make possible. 2 things right there in that statement. God designed each one of us and desires each one of us to have a good, gospel-centered, God-glorifying, healthy, loving, unifying marriage. It's God's desire and design. Second thing he says there is his grace can make it possible. Some of us have given up. And so this book is an encouragement to those who are wondering, can God do something in my marriage? Here are some of the ways we can see God work and the commitments you can make to the Lord and to your spouse day by day to move towards God's design and his grace for your marriage. So the first commitment, we will give ourselves to a regular lifestyle of confession and forgiveness. He says there is only one way for your marriage to be what God designed and enabled it to be, and it must involve confession and forgiveness. Part of the gospel and allowing God's power to work in our life is for us to actually say when we're wrong and to ask for forgiveness. And so he talks about that in a paragraph, and then later chapters in this book talk about this commitment in more depth. We move to the second commitment. He says we will make growth and change our agenda. He says we tend to settle for a relationship that is all about negotiating rights instead of one that loves to give and to serve. I've even seen this in my own marriage and life. We get selfish at times. And so we want other people to was this 50-50? Am I doing my part? Are you doing your part? And he says we are going to make a commitment to be focused on growth and change and giving and serving and loving our spouse in our marriage. Commitment number 3, he says, we will work together to build a sturdy bond of trust. He says, we simply cannot have a healthy, God-honoring, mutually satisfying marriage without trust. We need to go above and beyond in the life of in our life and in a relationship with our spouse to build trust and to keep trust. He says, in a fallen world, trust is the fine china of a relationship. It is beautiful when it is there, but it is surely delicate and breakable. And we must do whatever's in our power to build trust and to maintain trust in our marriage relationship. So moving on to commitment 4, he says, we will commit to building a relationship of love. He says, we will incarnate Christ's love in our marriage and in our relationship. He says, I am convinced there are many marriages devoid of real love because they actually do not place themselves and seek first Christ's love. He says, yes, there may be some respect appreciation and couples may do these different things. But he says, but the practical and personal sacrifices that define love are simply not present in many marriages. And he goes on to talk about allowing Christ's love to be incarnate, to show through our marriage. Then he gets to commitment 5. He says, we will deal with our differences with appreciation and grace. He goes on to say in this paragraph, he says, celebrating the Creator, we will face our differences with hope. Instead of growing bitter and trying to change the other person, he says, we will appreciate the differences and try to treat our spouse with grace, that God has put us together for a reason. We are different for a reason. He said he puts very different people next to each other. This is how he establishes the beauty of a marriage. And so he unpacks that in that chapter, or in that paragraph, and then later chapters in the book. And then commitment 6, he says, we will work to protect our marriage. Watching and praying, we will work to protect our relationship. He goes on to say, every marriage requires divine intervention and watchful protection. And so he talks about it there. Just, we will work to protect our marriage, to guard it, to fortify it, to invest in it. And that's just such an important aspect. He ends this chapter really with this statement. He says, there are 6 commitments. These are the 6 commitments that we just went through of a healthy marriage, and with practice, they become daily habits. These are commitments that you have to commit to daily to the Lord and to your spouse. These are things that you guard. These are things that you make a priority, and you ask God's help in living these out in your marriage. He says, there are few things sweeter and more beautiful than a long-term marriage of unity, understanding, and love. That's what all of us desire. We want a marriage of unity, understanding, and love. But he says there are few things more deeply discouraging and personally hurtful than a marriage of distance, coldness, and conflict. You probably have people in your life, maybe even your marriage as you're watching this video, and you're like, I really have a marriage of distance, coldness, and conflict, and I want change. And I would encourage you to pick up this book and pray about some of the change God would bring to your life by getting closer to him and committing to some of these things in your relationship. The last sentence on this paragraph is, there are few things sadder than couples who settle for survival or choose to coast or stay together, but essentially have given up on one another. And that's really what we're fighting. That's what I said earlier in this video, right before the 6 commitments, is God's design is for us to be in a loving, unifying, grace-filled, incredible marriage relationship that grows over time. Yes, it goes through different seasons, but we're growing closer to God and one another over time. And we're not settling, we're not choosing to coast, and we're not giving up on one another. So with that, I encourage you to check out this book. If you want more about its contents, you can check out the review that I've already done on my channel that I'll link below in the description. So this book is an excellent book for couples that are seriously considering marriage, so right around pre-engagement. Those who are engaged, this is a great place to start, and it's a great place. It's especially written for people who are a few years into marriage. The expectations you had have been totally blown up, and marriage has turned into something you're like, what do I want for my marriage? We're not where I want to be. How do we move forward with God and with each other in a healthy way? And this is an excellent book for that audience and that need. So 2 of my other favorite books on marriage and dating: The Mingling of Souls by Matt Chandler, God's Design for Love, Marriage, Sex, and Redemption. This is based off of Matt Chandler's sermon series through the Song of Solomon, or the Song of Songs. And it really moves through all different phases of the relationship. I read this when I was single, before I was married to my wife. And it was an excellent book for that, because it allowed me to build right biblical expectations of what those seasons were going to be. And he moves through the kind of honeymoon phase at the very beginning of Song of Solomon. Then he moves through the marriage phase and what that commitment to one another and what that is biblically. And then he gets to the end of the book of Song of Solomon, and you get chapters on conflict resolution and choosing to stay, choosing to grow, choosing to forgive. And so those themes throughout this book, this was really helpful for me as someone who was single looking forward to marriage. And so this is an excellent book. I really feel for people who desire to be married one day. Maybe God hasn't brought it, and you're praying through choosing the right spouse for the right reasons and setting right expectations. Another excellent book on marriage. So the second one I'll recommend. So those are two, Matt Chandler and Paul Tripp. The final one, maybe potentially the best one, honestly, is Timothy Keller with his wife, Kathy Keller, The Meaning of Marriage. He has an excellent chapter in here on singleness. So if you're not married, but you desire to be married, get this book, read the first couple chapters, and then read the chapter on singleness. Amazing, or this / preparing for marriage. So amazing read for that. Then when you're in the engagement period, read this book again. This book's key to power is the very beginning. He talks about you need the Holy Spirit in you to make this commitment. It is key on you making sure that God is living in you and you're getting married for the right reasons. So read this chapter when you're engaged, and I would tell you 4-5 years into your marriage, pull this book out and read it again. It is that good. And the way that he talks through the different chapters, I mean, you get the secret of marriage, the power of marriage being the Holy Spirit. And then it talks about loving the stranger, embracing the other, the mission of marriage. Chapter 7, singleness and marriage. That's the chapter if you're single. So read the first 3 chapters, the secret, the power, the essence, the mission, and then skip to singleness and marriage if you're single. If you're engaged, read the whole thing. And if you're married, read the whole thing. Chapter 8 is sex and marriage, and then the epilogue, and he talks about some other things at the end. But this is an excellent book. Tim Keller did most of it. His wife, Kathy Keller, helped him with different chapters. I believe she wrote 1 or 2 chapters as well. So 3 excellent books. 3 excellent books right here on marriage. Paul Tripp, Marriage. Matt Chandler, The Mingling of Souls. And on Song of Solomon, walk through Song of Solomon, and Timothy Keller on marriage, The Meaning of Marriage. And the subtitle is Facing the Complexities of Commitment with the Wisdom of God. So super helpful resources right here. If you have a favorite marriage book, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. Would love to dialogue about that and hear what God has used in your life personally, in your marriage, in your relationships as well. So with that, until next time, continue to read, treasure, follow the word. God bless, and I'll see you guys soon.